two of Dianne Keaton's adopted children, Dexter and Duke, went to the lawyer's office in a mad dash to lay claim to the enormous fortune just 5 days after she passed away. Adding further complexity and tension to the situation, Diane's two biological sisters soon joined the fray, claiming a portion of the bequest. Many questions were raised by the aggression and hurry. Was it really that easy to classify Diane's death as pneumonia? She spent her last weeks in isolation, losing weight quickly and dealing with continuous coughing and a postponed 911 call. These were all red flags that caused fans to get worried. "This is the only person I have ever loved more than my children," Diane had informed her pals. However, the remarks resounded like an angry inquiry as her siblings engaged in a struggle for control of the land. Was her love for him genuine or just a pretext to inherit her vast wealth? Suspicion swirled around her strange choices in her last months, including her desire to withdraw from public view, sell her Beverly Hills house swiftly, and cut ties with friends. Were these moves designed to put Diane on the defensive so that she could challenge the validity of her $100 million will? In the video, we will investigate all of this. During the early hours of October 11, 2025, the renowned American actress Diane Keaton was discovered in ill health at her Santa Monica, California private apartment. She was transported to St. John's Health Center by paramedics who responded rapidly to an emergency call. Diane, who was 79 years old, died at the hospital despite prompt medical treatment. Many fans and media members were left with unanswered questions when her family declared that bacterial pneumonia was the official reason. In the months leading up to her mysterious disappearance from the spotlight and social media, Diane's narrative takes center stage. She supposedly displayed obvious symptoms of deteriorating health in the weeks leading up to her passing. She had disappeared from sight as she walked Reggie, her cherished puppy, through the tree-lined streets of Los Angeles. A trusted acquaintance disclosed that her condition had deteriorated since the catastrophic wildfires that compelled her to evacuate Beverly Hills in early 2025. She sought refuge in Palm Springs, a more peaceful area, but the night was drawing close. Why would a lady who is normally so enthusiastic, joyful, and creative withdraw to such an extent? Was she secretly battling some other sickness? Something her loved ones were reluctant to tell her. Medical professionals say that pneumonia is a familiar foe. It can hit older persons like a hurricane, especially if their immune systems are already compromised. It was obvious that Diane, being 79 years old, was in a high-risk category. What was strange, though, was the quick weight she lost in the latter weeks. A buddy somberly explained how much weight she dropped. Did she have an underlying condition that was draining her energy, or was this just the result of pneumonia? On the morning of October 11th, someone called 911 to report that she was discovered at home unconscious. Why was her condition not noticed sooner? Were red flags anything she was attempting to conceal? Diane has a long history of health struggles, as is evident from her life story. Basal cell carcinoma, a skin cancer she encountered at the age of 20, was a result of her unprotected sun exposure in California. Squamous cell cancer showed up decades later, necessitating 2 operations. It was with her trademark smile that she confessed to once being too reckless with her skin. Next, Diane fearlessly opened up about her struggle with bulimia in her memoir. Then again, she spiraled into unhealthy eating habits and self-harm in her 20s as she felt pressured to slim down for a Broadway job. 20,000 calories daily, fried chicken, fries, sweets, then purging it all. Despite overcoming her addiction through therapy, she maintained that she would remain a lifelong recovering addict. We can rule out respiratory problems as a cause of these 2 diseases. To what end was pneumonia given as the reason for Diane's demise? The fact that Diane sold her Beverly Hills dream house in a rush at the beginning of 2025 is another piece of evidence that has people suspicious. She had spent years painstakingly repairing this place that she had once referred to as her forever home. Critics and viewers were taken aback because Diane was famous for her boundless enthusiasm for home design, particularly traditional Spanish colonial revival houses. Many wondered why she would leave a place she cared about so much. Was there anything else going on in your life except money that made this decision? The quick deterioration of Diane's health, according to some close sources, may have prompted her to sell the house. More suspicion, meanwhile, was prompted by the family's decision to remain tight-lipped about her condition. Some others thought Diane may have been pressured to leave her home because of problems in her personal relationships or because of legal issues. This decision, which was both unexpected and shrouded in mystery, left a huge hole in the narrative of her last days. The media and fans started to guess. Would Diane have stayed in the house if she had known something about her future, or if she had encountered an unforeseen event? Once a representation of her individuality and taste, her house is now the center of a mystery that has yet to be solved. Despite their haste to prepare for Diane's cremation and notify the world of her demise, the family has steadfastly declined to comment on Diane's condition or what happened after she passed away. A lot of people, including journalists and fans, thought something was being hidden because of all the secrecy. Duke and Dexter, Diane's adopted children, went to see attorneys right once upon her death to challenge the will. This set off a chain reaction. In her 50s, Diane made the unexpected decision to become a single mother, shattering the mold of her spectacular cinematic career that had previously included famous roles in The Godfather and Annie Hall. Diane sought motherhood through adoption since she was single. Dexter was born to her on December 15, 1995, and she welcomed her into the world in 1996, when she was 50 years old. Diane later revealed that she had never thought she was prepared for the job, but that it had a profound and emotional impact on her life. Diane adopted her son Duke, who was born on February 8, 2000, and was just over a year old, 5 years later in 2001. Diane, at 55 years old, raised her 2 children alone in her comfortable Beverly Hills home while juggling the glitz and glitter of Hollywood on business travels. Growing up in their mother's loving care, Dexter and Duke were protected from the public eye, making only rare appearances at occasions like film premieres and awards ceremonies. Simple love and intimacy shone through in these instances, just as it did in the family portrait taken for Dexter's wedding in 2021. It appeared as though all was well. As soon as Diane left, though, that mask fell. Annie Hall's 2 children engaged in a savage struggle over the estimated $100 million estate she left behind as the world grieved her, what led to the rapid deterioration of family ties. There was an immediate and palpable air of sadness and loss in the Beverly Hills residence after Diane Keaton took her final breath on the morning of October 11, 2025. A different tale, however, started to emerge within a few hours. Dexter and Duke, who were adopted by Diane, hurried to the office of her lawyer. They wanted to make sure their stake in Diane's enormous inheritance was safe. Aspiring interior designer Dexter departed from the office of a prominent Los Angeles law company on October 16, lugging a heavy stack of papers. After being adopted in 1996, she reportedly asserted her right to the lion's share of the estate, citing the length of time she had spent with her mother as her justification. Her primary objective was to repair Diane's $4.7 million 2009 acquisition, the Brentwood house, the showpiece of her real estate portfolio. The house that Pinterest built was her mother's book, and Dexter said she had helped her with renovations, inherited her love of architecture, and more. The house was more than just a house. It was a representation of the unique relationship she had with Diane, a connection she thought could never be replaced. Not to be outdone either by her younger brother Duke. He was a young software entrepreneur who showed up at another Santa Monica legal office armed with correspondence between himself and Diane. Duke felt he should have received the lion's share of the film's profits in cash, between $40 and $50 million, taking into account the earnings from her 3 best-selling memoirs and films such as Something's Gotta Give. He maintained that Diane had provided financial backing for his startup endeavors and made light of the fact that Duke would carry on his legacy. Following in his mother's footsteps, he sought control of the trust fund that Diane had set up, thinking it would allow him to construct his own empire. Rumor has it that the fact that Dexter and Duke were both adopted contributed to the strained relationship between them, even though Diane had hand-picked them for love. Diana frequently brought Dexter, who was 5 years older than Duke, to events because they had a love of architecture and because Diane saw Dexter as the spiritual successor to her mother, who had grown up in the shadow of a Hollywood celebrity. Duke, who was self-reliant and focused on his career, believed that Diane's love for him was secondary. Even at their Beverly Hills home for the holidays, the couple seldom ever had passionate talks, according to a family acquaintance. The buddy assured me that they don't dislike one another, but she also claimed that they've never had the kind of genuine love that siblings feel. With Diane's estate as their sole common ground, the physical separation between them became an emotional trigger. However, this will not serve the purpose of reconciliation. Diane had a thorough will that she had written in 2015 and revised in 2025 right before she sold her dream Beverly Hills property. This added another layer of complexity to the scenario. Although the precise distributions were not specified, the will designated Dexter and Duke as the principal heirs through a trust. Diane reportedly wanted Dexter to get the majority of the estate, according to those close to the matter. Duke took home most of the money and stock from investments, but the muddled distribution caused friction because both parties felt they deserved more. Rumors started spreading shortly after regarding a gift Diane had planned to give to the Los Angeles Conservancy, a group she had supported for more than 20 years in its fight to preserve architectural heritage. Defiant, Dexter stated that her mother had intended to preserve the estates as a legacy for the family and had no interest in selling or donating them. Duke, she said, was merely interested in money and failed to recognize the historical and cultural significance of the houses that Diane had spent her life repairing. On the other hand, according to Duke, Dexter was attempting to safeguard Mom's creative legacy by hoarding all assets, even if he needed money to keep working on his technological initiatives. When Dexter retained a private attorney to examine the trust, tensions rose to a boiling point because Dexter believed Duke had tried to get Diane to change her will in her last months as her health was deteriorating. After Diane's funeral, Duke allegedly contacted her real estate partners in an effort to get their opinions on the value of her sold Laguna Beach and Arizona homes revaluated. Duke said his goal was to make sure everything was open and no assets were missed, but Dexter said it was unethical. Meetings, emails, and uncomfortable phone calls between Duke and Dexter filled each day. They were so close that they almost had an explosive argument at the lawyer's office. According to an insider, accusations and fights continued even after they crossed into emotionally charged territory. It could have been easier to divide the estate if just the two adopted children were involved. Still, people started speaking out, including Diane's biological sisters. Dory Hall, the youngest sister, who is now 75 years old and a lesser-known actress who has always been very close to her sister, made a surprise appearance with a claim just a few days following the funeral. Dory claimed Diane had assured her that she would receive financial assistance from her estate throughout her twilight years. She suspected Diane may have left something to her sisters that Dexter and Duke missed, so she contacted a lawyer in Los Angeles to examine the will, which had been revised in 2015 and altered in March 2025. Robin Hall, the third sister, became involved in the conflict shortly after, somewhere around 7377. Robin was a reclusive Southern Californian who lived a low-key life. However, she spoke out on this occasion. Dory and Robin were both listed as family supporters in brother and sister, and Robin wanted a portion of income from Diane's books during a difficult discussion with Dexter. She insisted she was entitled to payment because she had looked after their brother Randy Hall for so long. Dory and Robin started approaching Duke personally, which further complicated the battle. They were not adopted children, but rather the biological offspring of Diane, and Dory made it clear at a conference in Santa Monica that she wanted Duke to split a large quantity of money. Duke, whose relationship with Dexter was already strained, felt even more trapped and asserted that the two adopted children were expressly named as the principal heirs in the trust, leaving the sisters with no formal protections. While Dory and Robin were interfering, Dexter was enraged. She made it clear that Diane had decided to raise her and Duke as the only heirs, and she accused the two aunts of only becoming involved when they smelled money. Dory and Robin, according to Dexter's email to the lawyer, had led separate lives and made no substantial contributions to Diane's profession or wealth. Diane had suspicions that Dory, who had been a member of the Actors Equity Association and may have gotten financial backing from her before, was now seeking more. When Dory and Robin showed up to a Los Angeles law office together, things got hotter. Expecting complete candor on the will, they wanted to be sure their shares weren't being diverted from charity like the Los Angeles Conservancy, animal shelters, and food banks, so they questioned the allocation of monies to such causes. Robin went as far as calling Dexter personally, her voice quivering but determined, to ask for a family meeting so they could talk things out like grown-ups. According to Dexter, Mom picked us out, not our aunts. So he declined. Despite their strained relationship, Duke unexpectedly took her side when she opposed Dory and Robin's demands. He asserted that Diane had created the trust to give priority to her two adopted children rather than her biological siblings, so he retained the services of a second team of attorneys to defend his interests. This alignment, though, was transient. The long, stressful hours spent in the lawyer's office seemed to go on forever since Duke wanted most of the money and Dexter wanted the property and artwork. Asset distribution became more convoluted as a result of disputes, despite attorneys' constant reminders that all decisions must be based on the official will. The intensity of their discussions was so great that, according to an insider, Dory and Robin almost attacked Duke by grabbing each other, but they were both quickly stopped. The worst part was that Diane, who had previously stated that Dexter and Duke meant the world to her, probably never thought her darlings would betray each other so readily. The fact that they were adopted at various periods and had different personalities and life goals seemed to plant the seeds of alienation, despite her best efforts to raise them lovingly. Friends of Diane's, such as Jane Fonda, chose not to speak out about the scandal, but they did subtly convey their sorrow that Diane would be distressed to hear that her children were fighting. And large estate worth an estimated $100 million was bequeathed to Diane after her death. This sum is derived from her enthusiasm for real estate, which she pursued for almost half a century, as well as her acting remuneration, production, directing, and writing careers, with a net worth of about $50–60 million. Dianne Keaton's wealth is largely comprised of luxury real estate investments held for the long term. Her specialty was rehabilitating historic buildings in California, with an emphasis on mid-century modern Spanish colonial revival and mission revival styles. She became famous as a house flipper for her work in this area. A notable asset was the primary Brentwood home in Los Angeles, which was valued between $20 and $30 million. The 2004 acquisition of a $7.5 million Laguna Beach parcel. 2006, the 2012 acquisition price of a Pacific Palisades villa was $5.6 million, and the 2016 sale price was $6.9 million. In 2020, a property in Tucson, Arizona, $26 million. Her real estate transactions include a 2005 Bear Villa sale for $16.5 million, a 2010 Beverly Spanish colonial house sale to producer Ryan Murphy for $10 million, and a 2005 sale to Madonna for $6.5 million. She was named a Queen of Hollywood House Restoration by Architectural Digest for these deals, which were very lucrative and demonstrated her dedication to preserving historic buildings. Approximately $40 million in assets, including real estate, remained after Dianne Keaton's Hollywood career in various investments. with an average pay of $510 million per major movie. She earned millions from iconic films such as The Godfather, Annie Hall, Reds, Father of the Bride, Something's Gotta Give, and The Family Stone. She was able to supplement her regular income as a director and producer by working on television programs and music videos, like Belinda Carrill's Heaven is a Place on Earth, Brother and Sister 2020, Let's Just Say It Was, and Pretty 2015, Then Again in 2011, and her 3 memoirs, all of which were best-selling. Extra, $105 million came from endorsement deals and public speeches. In addition to her investment in photography and interior design, she made passive income from royalties and brand collaborations with her book, The House That Pinterest Built, which was inspired by her Brentwood home. Starting with the purchase of her first apartment in San Remo, New York in the 1980s, Diane Keaton was known for her long-term and preservation-focused real estate strategy with regard to investing strategy. Rather than buying with the intention of selling immediately, she would often spend years restoring neglected houses at below-market prices before selling them for a profit owing to their increased historical value. For 20 years, she was an investor in preservation initiatives as a member of the Los Angeles Conservancy Board, helping to stop the demolition of historic buildings. Her suspicions were further heightened by the violent conflict between her 2 children over the family's riches. Did Diane really die of a disease? Or were the children she cared about most involved in a heartless plot? As strange revelations from their mother's last months began to emerge, fans were sent shivers down their spines at the possibility that Dexter and Duke may have hurt her in order to take her fortune. Diane vanished from public eye nearly completely in her final 5 months of life. She abruptly canceled all public appearances, stopped being spotted strolling with Reggie in Los Angeles, and stopped posting enthusiastically on Instagram. Rumor has it that Diana and her adopted children, Dexter and Duke, retreated to Palm Springs after evacuating Beverly Hills owing to the wildfires. There is not a single post or photo. For someone as lovely as Diane, this quiet was completely out of the ordinary. If Dexter and Duke had knowingly concealed their mother's illness and restricted her contact with the outside world in order to manage her in her last days, she would not have been let down. The public did not learn of Diane's death until October 16, 2025, when the death certificate was released. On the morning of October 11th, someone called 911 to report that she had passed out at home. Until then, though, why hadn't emergency services been summoned? According to those in the know, Diane had been weakening and losing weight over the past few weeks, while exhibiting telltale symptoms of disease like chronic coughing and difficulty breathing, common signs and symptoms of pneumonia. The records of her previous doctor's appointments, however, were missing. Were her best friends, Dexter and Duke, on purpose trying to put off getting her medical attention? Alternately, did they disregard red flags because they anticipated a quick demise as an opportunity to gain control of the enormous trust? The seeming simplicity of bacterial pneumonia, the official cause of death, may be deceiving. According to medical professionals, common diseases such as the flu or cold can commonly lead to pneumonia in older persons. However, out of the ordinary causes, including being exposed to germs in a lab, can also cause it. Living with their mother in her last months, Dexter and Duke may have purposefully kept her in unhealthy settings, such as ignoring cleanliness or inadequate diet, weakening her body and increasing the likelihood of illness. This is a terrifying possibility. Diane may not have received adequate care. According to a friend who remembered that she had lost a significant amount of weight just before she passed away, the posthumous explosion during the estate dispute only served to heighten suspicions. It was said by an insider that Dexter and Duke had a rocky relationship. Still, they knew exactly what their mother's assets were. Diane's children may have pushed her to sell her dream Beverly Hills house in early 2025 as her health was deteriorating so that they could divide her possessions more easily. Notable as well as the state of Diane's mind in her latter months. She thought of herself as a lifelong recovering addict due to her struggles with bulimia. Especially as she became older, could Dexter and Duke have taken advantage of her psychological weakness to influence her financial decisions? Diane, according to some accounts, grew emotionally distant, stopped interacting with her friends, and leaned heavily on her 2 children. Pneumonia might have been a last-ditch effort to make sure she passed before changing the trust if they knowingly let her deteriorate by withholding feeding, medicine, or even psychological pressure. What drives people is still the most pressing issue. Diane adored and raised Dexter and Duke, but they were always in the spotlight because of their famous Hollywood father. They may have felt a sense of emotional and financial strain to live up to her expectations as her adoptive offspring. Because Dexter loved interior design so much, she wished she could hold on to the Brentwood house as a reminder of their connection. In the meantime, computer entrepreneur Duke needed funding to follow his dreams. Would they have harmed their mother in order to get what they wanted? Even though there isn't any hard proof, there are a lot of red flags, including Diane's seclusion, the delayed 911 call, and the seriousness of their estate battle. As soon as word got out, fans started sharing terrifying speculations on Reddit, Twitter, and other social networking sites. In addition to the actress's 2 adopted children, Dexter and Duke, many people think that the actress's death was caused by anything other than pneumonia. It sends chills down the spines of anybody who hears the theory. For the last several months of her life, Diane Keaton spent practically all of her time alone with her adopted sons, Dexter and Duke, and avoided public gatherings at her Palm Springs estate. Using Diane's love and trust, they painstakingly plotted for months. While Duke, driven by his ambition in business, consistently offered Diane sound financial and investment advice, Dexter, who was deeply devoted to the Brentwood home and passionate about interior design, took care of her under the pretense of worry. Their first move was to take over Diane's home. Poorly handled drugs and healthcare contributed to nutritionally deficient meals. Despite Diane's deterioration in strength, fast weight loss, and extreme exhaustion, she remained convinced that her children were caring for her well. Even while they pretended to be worried, Dexter and Duke were actually doing everything they could to make her life harder and weaker. Slowly but surely, they cut Diane apart from her old friends and co-workers. Almost all of her social life disappeared. Restricted activities included walks with Reggie, phone conversations, and social media posting. Diane became totally reliant on the adopted children because they constantly brought attention to her weakness, telling her she needed to stay home and avoid others. Dexter and Duke stuck to the plan even though Diane started exhibiting symptoms of illness in September 2025, including a chronic cough, shortness of breath, and significant weight loss. They failed to contact a doctor promptly. Instead, they meticulously tracked her status to guarantee that everything happened as planned. While Duke took care of paperwork and assets, making sure that all the estates and trusts were under their hands, Dexter would give Diane empty promises whenever she complained of being tired. A sharp downturn in Diane's health occurred on October 11, 2025. The latter part of the strategy was carried out by the adopted children. By the time she was practically still, it was too late to dial 911. The arrival of the paramedics came at the last possible moment, although bacterial pneumonia was indicated as the reason of death on the certificate. The truth was that it was brought about by long-term disability and a strictly controlled living situation that Dexter and Duke had contrived. In the wake of Diane's death, they dove headfirst into a court battle for her enormous estate. Everything went off without a hitch because of how well they worked together. Dory and Robin, along with the rest of the family, were kept out of all decision-making processes and their assets were centralized. In an effort to preserve the estate and maintain financial control, Dexter and Duke adamantly rejected the claim that Diane's biological sisters had on the trust. They were well prepared, having thought of every detail that would be required to get their fair share and eliminate family problems. A well-orchestrated family crime seems to be the pattern of events. Fans persist in believing Diane Keaton died of an illness, although Dexter and Duke had meticulously orchestrated every event to achieve their purpose. They became the owners of all assets. As their dreams came true, Diane quietly left her two adoptive children with a tremendous legacy. It turned out to be the ideal crime narrative. Absent any conclusive proof, no solid trail. But it all worked out just as expected. Put Diane in isolation, make her body weaker, take control of her assets, and remove any hurdles in her way. If the theory that Dexter and Duke were responsible for Diane Keaton's demise is correct, it would be an incredibly tragic narrative. Even though she waited until she was 50 years old to have children of her own, Diane gave her everything to her adoptive children. Son Duke in 2001 and her daughter Dexter in 1996 were both adopted by her, providing them with a place to call home and the means to lead regular lives away from the limelight in Hollywood. A profound and genuine affection flowed from Diane to Dexter and Duke. She always did her best to offer her kids an ordinary life, free from unwanted attention, because she felt that being a mother was the most modest experience that changed her. Betrayed by those she loved most in order to have her estate taken would be a devastating blow if the terrible speculations on Reddit and other media are accurate, terrifying her admirers and supporters. Many people are still paying attention to the protracted dispute over Diane Keaton's fortune, fighting for ownership of everything from cash and investment shares to book royalties and precious real estate. The two adopted children, Dexter and Duke, were drawn into intense negotiations with attorneys. At the same time, Diane's biological sisters Dory and Robin joined the fray, seeking recognition and recompense for the many years they spent caring for Diane and her family. The family dynamic became increasingly complex and stressful with each meeting and phone contact, and everyone felt they deserved the best. Many people still don't have their answers to the question of Diane's will, which is surrounded by fierce disputes and uncertainties. Who exactly will be the last recipient of the actress's fortune? Which set of rights will be more favorable? The two adopted children who spent a lot of time with their mom, or the two sisters who were born into a close family? Time and judicial rulings will determine the outcome.